Today, back by popular demand, we have another deployment breakdown for y'all with Starshatter Arsenal, and today it's going to be including the list without the Silent King. Look, I get it. If you're somebody that does not have the Silent King, but you are very excited about Starshatter Arsenal, wanting to start going to some tournaments this year, then stick around because this video is for you. I'm going to be breaking down exactly how I deploy this list on the tabletop going into turn one. And I'm going to sprinkle some things in throughout this video of as far as strategies to think about, tactics to think about, going into your next game if you're playing one maybe this weekend or in a tournament. And hopefully, whether you play Necrons or not, you get some value out of it. So let's get into it. So deployment breakdown today for Starshatter Arsenal, and we are on a GW layout 6, and this is Crucible of Battle deployment, so it's a diagonal deployment. This is a pretty common layout you will see in local tournaments. I'm based here in the US, so we are doing some of these GW layouts, but I will say that we are going to be prepping for a teams tournament coming up in the next 2 months, and some of those are going to be WTC layouts. So we are going to be having some spicy deployment breakdowns with some WTC if you guys want to see that as well and how I would change things up. But we're talking about layout 6 today, so let's get into it. So first things first, we have our units here on the right-hand side, and it's from the list that you saw earlier this week. If you haven't seen that yet, I will link it at the end of this video. But we, as we all know, are going to start off with are infiltrators. And where are infiltrators at? They are the flayed ones, okay? So flayed ones in this deployment, there's a couple different options of where we can put them. Now, the biggest thing is that when you're thinking about infiltrators is you don't want to put them on points, right? Turn one, because we don't want to give up overwhelming force, and we don't want to give up stern hostile. Common theme. I'm just like driving this home. So there's a couple different ways we could do this. We could put them here, okay? Of course, off the objective, right? So you could put them like here. Again, this is similar to other deployment breakdown videos. If I put them here, and let's say let me swing this over here so I can actually mark this up. So let's say they have let's just say for instance, you're playing guard. This is a very good example, or Votan, okay? A lot of times they're going to have some sort of vehicle right here that they're going to be able to scout up, move over here, and just clip these flayed ones turn one, and you got nothing out of it. Okay, so that's something that we really want to prevent in our deployment, is you don't want any sort of easy just, all right, I'm going to blitz off the line, I'm losing this resource, it never feels good, and you got nothing for the flayed ones in return, okay? That's a very common thing that can happen against a lot of different matchups, and we don't want that to happen to you. So a quick fix or a quick option that you can do is you can bring these flayed ones and you can park them behind here. So, and they're a small enough footprint where they're going to essentially stage right about there. So it changes essentially where if this Chimera wants to scout up and then it needs to move, it still probably doesn't have enough movement to draw a line to clip these flayed ones. So essentially your opponent's going to have to think twice about if they want to stage that resource up, because now if they do stage it up, it's going to be getting hit by flayed ones next turn. And spoiler alert, flayed ones damage in Starshatter Arsenal is really good. So now is it good enough to kill a Chimera? Probably not. But with that said, so flayed ones are going to go. Let's just say we're going to put them right there, at least for this this matchup. Another good spot you could put them is right here. This is another good spot in just lining this wall. Again, we want to be 1 inch away. Somebody asked this in one of the previous things, and I didn't highlight that well enough. Essentially, you want to stay 1 inch away from the wall. So that way it prevents anything that's on a 32 mil base or larger isn't able to actually charge through the wall and engage them in combat. So essentially, you kind of block that area or that ability for that unit to charge, which is most lethal melee units in the game. So this is also a good option to put the flayed ones here, so you're lining this wall, so you're preventing any sort of melee or high pressure aggro list to be able to blitz this side of the table turn one. and then it still gives your flayed ones flexibility if they do move 5 inches to just get up on this point and do some secondaries, whether it's area denial, secure no man's land, storm hostile, potentially turn 1 if they get on it, things like that. So we'll just leave the flayed ones right here for this matchup and just line them kind of 1 inch away from the wall right there. Next, again, we're going to put down our home field. Nothing's really changed from last time. If you want to hear more commentary in depth about this home field strategy, there is another video on that. But in a nutshell, this is a good package that I would deploy next. Because again, when you're deploying, you want to give your opponent the least amount of information possible up front. So getting those obvious things out of the way that's not really telling you which side you're going to go or your strong side and weak side, the better. So we're going to have Imhotep right here. He's our CP farm. We're going to have a Hexmark Destroyer back here, and just lining the, helping screen out this 9 back here. And it's a lone op, which is great. And then Imhotep is obviously our CP farm. Okay. So next up, what we mentally want to think about again is what our strong side is going to be and what our weak side is going to be. So in this layout, usually our natural expansion is going to be this objective. And a newer player, if you're asking, okay, well, like, how can you obviously tell? Because this objective is just as close as this one. And mainly what we're looking at is just the wall, right? So we have a nice kind of barrier to help prevent line of sight. So this is going to be easier for us to defend than this one, because if we get on this point, obviously there's going to be tons of ways that your opponent can draw a line of sight to this objective and get you off of it. Whereas if you're on this one, it's a lot harder for them to draw a line of sight. Okay. So we're mainly trying, this is our target as far as where we want to anchor down. Like that's where we're going to really emphasize our anchor units in the list. And these are the objectives that we're looking to harass throughout the game. Okay. So knowing that up front, a next unit I would probably put out is the Scorpech destroyers. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab these Scorpech destroyers and we're going to put them on the line right here. Okay. Now you could ask, okay, like, well, why did you not put them here? Or why did you not, put them over here? The biggest thing with Scorpech destroyers, just like flayed ones, is you want to think about your melee units and where they are going turn 1. Like where are you wanting to stage up those units? So with the Scorpech destroyers specifically, I know for sure turn 1, I'm going to want to line this wall with Scorpech destroyers because they have movement 8. They're going to be safe there. And it allows me to definitely threaten this objective. Like I can cover the whole objective. And if they want to put anything like in this vicinity right here, the Scorpechs are going to have enough movement with movement 8 plus a charge to really threaten anything over here. Okay? Is what we're thinking about. All right. So thinking in terms of what they call like threat bubbles, right? So, essentially the Scorpechs are covering like this area right here. Okay. And they hit very hard in this attachment. So in the early game, they're gonna trade up pretty easily. Okay. So next up after that, we're gonna start showing our weak side a little bit, or where we're gonna be like harassing our opponent. And this is where I usually like to deploy one of the stalkers. So we're gonna put a stalker right here. And the reason for that is it gives us flexibility. If we need to scout it up, we can scout it up here if we go first. If we go second, it gives us flexibility to scout it behind a wall or over in this direction here to keep it safe. So again, we're not like losing a resource for nothing turn 1. And I can't stress enough, stalkers are just so good in this attachment. With the OC4, the scout, they just solve a lot of early game problems that Starshatter, I feel like, runs into. So we're going to put a stalker right there. Then we're going to swing over and we're going to bring in the Tomb Blades. So Tomb Blades, same thing. They're going to go probably right about here. Let me switch these icons around so it's easier for you guys to see. And same idea. So Tomb Blades, as you know, they scout 9. So it's going to give us flexibility to scout them behind the wall or right here. And then the stalker can scout over here and keep out of LOS if we go if we go second. If we end up going first, then we can scout up over in this direction and start threatening over here, okay? Just depending on what secondaries you get in that. So next, probably what I would deploy is our unit of 2 Emidics. And again, the Emidics, their job is really to play the early skirmish game. So again, I'm really wanting them to put them in a position where they are the most flexible to get their shots, right? So if I need to like basically stage them here and advance and move them out, they can draw a line over here, they can cover this, and they can cover over here. Okay, so just trying to think about, again, turn 1, if my opponent is being aggressive or you're playing like an aggro type list, how can I put them in a position on the deployment line where no matter what direction they go, they're going to have a line somewhere, okay? You could also put them here as well. Not as good of a spot because I feel like they're a little bit too far away from the action. Again, we're really trying to make sure they're within 18 inches to maximize that rapid fire range. So by putting them over here, moving them up, they might be a little bit too far away to threaten stuff that you need over here, and especially over here. So this seems like a better spot for that unit of 2, and that is the Emidics, okay? Next up, we will put down our Reanimator, and this is going to go with our Anchor package, okay? Now, what I am thinking about when I am doing this is I want to limit the potential of them getting line of sight on a Reanimator. So a lot of times either there's a pretty nasty line that comes through here that you have to be cognizant of, but a lot of times you can line the Reanimator either somewhere here or here is a good spot for it. In this matchup right now, I'm going to put it right here, and I will explain why here in just a second. So we'll put the Reanimator right there. Again, thinking about where it wants to go, and we know more or less that it wants to probably shift somewhere like over here or over here, okay? And moving up next, we are going to put down our Catacomb Command Barge, and that is part of our anchor piece, and we're going to put that right here, okay? Mainly because and again, on this map, it is a little bit tough with some of the lines in the center of the battlefield, where it's very easy for them to draw lines. So we do have to be very, very careful of that, okay? Especially here and here, okay? So we're really trying to stay outside of those areas there when deploying. And then you probably already guessed it. Next up, our main anchor piece is the race with the Crypto Thralls, okay? So we are going to be putting, now there's a couple different ways that you could do this, okay? So the first way is we could put the race right here with the Crypto Thralls, okay? Now, their footprint is pretty big where, you know, they're definitely going to be able to get shots on them turn 1, which it's one of those things depending on if you want to bait your opponent out, because the Wraiths are very much like kind of a bait move, mainly because you have the Resorb synergy here with the Catacomb Command Barge, and you have the option to just like move onto an objective and spend a CP to double reanimate for 2d3. So, oh, sorry, and the Technomancer is here too. All right. Second here. So something like that. Okay. So that package lives right there. And then we're going to have our Doomsday Arc back here. This is usually a good spot for it. I'll just like rotate it to kind of symbolize like how it looks, because it's kind of like a long boat. But this gives you flexibility to move it this way, fire down this firing lane. You can move it up here, fire here. You could potentially even like flat 6 advance it and move it up here and then get this firing line up here. So you can cover a lot of area in that spot, where again, your opponent just has to respect that it's there, because if it does pop off, it's going to do some serious damage. So usually a good spot for it. Helps with the screening as well. And then this is what is going to be in reserve. So we're going to have a unit of 2 Locust Heavy Destroyers. that we can drop in depending on which side our opponent is pushing. So if they're pushing harder on the right or they're pushing hard on the left. And then we have our block of 6 Locust Destroyers, just the regular ones. And those are AP2, flat 2, and they have the ignore cover enhancement, which allows them to punch up in a lot of matchups. And then the spice to this list, or the little X factor, is the Triarch Praetorians, which I'm going to be playtesting more. But I really like how they can play in this attachment, mainly because, yes, they are 100 points. But the biggest thing is they have deep strike, they move 10, they fly, and they are strength 5, AP 2, damage 2, with the option to give them +1 to hit and +1 to wound, which makes them extremely more potent in this detachment when played well. And so with this unit specifically, is you're always wanting to use them on ingress, right? So turn 2, what you're looking for is depending on, where your opponent is staging up, over here, right? With the Stalker and the Tomb Blades, it synergizes very well with the Praetorians, mainly because the Stalker and the Tomb Blades provide this strong early game board presence, especially the Stalker, because they're so durable. So what happens is it helps push back some of the enemy resources early to make sure on turn 2, when you are looking to ingress in these Praetorians, they can get to the spot that they need to go. And the thing is they're a very small footprint because it's only 5 bases. So a lot of times, like a realistic threat, sometimes, you might be able to, let's say like these resources, I'm just going to move this back here. There's actually, there we go. Okay, let's move these Tomb Blades back. Let's move the Stalker back. So with these Praetorians, and this will be covered in like another video, probably like a strategy video, but I'll give you a little Easter egg since y'all are hanging out to the end here. So the Praetorians are essentially looking to ingress in and finding a spot that's safe. So obviously keeping them out of LOS, they're a small footprint, but the biggest thing is, like, let's say your opponent has they have like a unit here, which is pretty common. They have a unit staged up back here, and they have a unit here, because they don't usually want to expose anything on this line, because they know that these units are in reserve and they don't want me to just drop these in and just shoot them, right? So this is a very realistic board presence turn 2, going into turn 2 for your opponent. And so having them here and pending any Overwatch threats or anything, it allows them to fly over and threaten something over here or over here and do legit some serious damage, mainly because they're 15 attacks at 522. So most things that are hitting on 2s, and then the option to wound most things in the game on 2s. Extremely efficient. So for 100 points, and definitely going to be playtesting them more. I don't know if 1 or 2 units feels best, but 2 units does seem very interesting, because it gives you another unit to ingress in on the next turn that they have to respect, that can legit threaten their home field because they move so fast, right? So if they don't screen properly and you just let them, move 10 inches and fly over and threaten your opponent's home objective, something like that, it's very easy, I think, to catch your opponent off guard with these units. 1, because there's not a lot of people playing them yet. And 2, I think there's some really good synergies that haven't been explored yet with Starshatter, with the Praetorians specifically. So that is essentially the list in a nutshell. One last thing I wanted to go over, if you are all still sticking around, appreciate you, is another option you can do with the race is just putting the package over here. And I'm going to talk about the race here in a second. Let me shift these over here. So on a couple different, this layout specifically, this might be a better spot for them, mainly because what you're trying to do is essentially blitz one of these objectives, getting the race on there, turn 1, right? So you're moving all of these resources up here. You have the, there we go, sorry. And then moving the Technomancer up there. and then you have the catacomb command barge and maybe like the reanimator like back here tucked away out of line of sight, and then you're stringing back like these units. But essentially what happens is you have the Wraith at OC3. You have the reroll ones to hit and wound aura on the catacomb command barge, so the Wraiths can like legit do some damage in this detachment, especially with the +1 to wound strat as well. And then the idea is turn 2, what happens is you can bring these Wraiths off the point and either go this way or threaten this objective over here. And because they stayed back, usually your opponent, because they don't want to interact with the race, is it allows you to either ingress in the Praetorians, or you could put the Locust Destroyer unit on here to then hold down this objective while your race are harassing the center. So it kind of helps solve the problem of like holding down the primary just in a different way instead of the king. But I think it functions very well when played correctly with those units, and they all still synergize together. So there's a couple options. And I think one thing that's really cool with the race, not on this layout specifically, but it does give you options to essentially move up the race. And if we want here, I'm just going to symbolize this really quick. Sorry, I'm kind of getting into more like some strategy stuff. I hope you guys don't mind. But if we look at the race here, right? So actually, okay. And of course we do have to triangle, right? So it looks something like, so it would look something like this, right? And then you have your crypto thralls, and then you have like your technomancer, and you're probably like, kind of, what are you doing? So what is an option on some of these layouts? This one doesn't, you wouldn't be able to do this as well on this one. I don't think it's really viable just because the lines are pretty harsh in the center here. But like on layout 1 would be a really good example where you could pull this off. Is the race solve a problem in terms of being able to potentially threaten 2 objectives reliably turn 1? Because essentially you could almost put 6 OC on each of these objectives. And let's say, okay, your opponent is faced with this. They go into turn 1. They're moving up their, their vehicles or whatever, right? And it puts them in a predicament because they know you're going to need to pull from either one side or the other, right? And they don't want to overextend themselves in terms of like, oh, okay, I want to put like resources on here and start shooting you off. And they're like, well, okay, cool. Well, I'm just gonna remove the race over here. And what happens is, either way you go, you're essentially creating a dilemma for them, because what happens is they start killing the race, right? So I'm just going to remove these dead race, right? So let's say they kill 3 race in the shooting phase, very common. Then all you do, you pop your res strat, right? It's going to be D6 plus D3. Let's say you luck out, you get like 2 race back, right? You see what's happening? And then on your turn, you're going to res another 2D3, right? And then they're back. And then that's also on top of, let's say you spent a CP after they were done shooting, and you shift these units over here with the react move. You see what you can do with these race. That's like that can be very, very nasty in this attachment, because all of a sudden you went from having 6 OC on both to at the start of my turn now having like 15 OC on my natural expansion, and vice versa, right? Let's just repeat this again, just so it kind of like gets ingrained. And rewatch this part. This is like the Easter egg if you guys like stuck around. Let's say they shift up this way, right? And they're going after this objective. Same exact thing, right? You're like, oh, okay, they're pushing hard this side. Okay. Let's say they kill 3 race, right? And then same exact thing happens, right? You're resing more race on this side now. And then all of a sudden, you still hold primary because they assaulted this one. And then this is also on my strong side. And then on my turn, then all of a sudden what happens? They shifted all these resources out here. I still got my primary. They didn't really kill anything in return. And now all of a sudden, they have 6 Locust Destroyers, right? And anti-tank destroyers and everything else that's going to go after him the next turn. So, yeah. Very cool list. Very fun. Try it out if you don't have the Silent King. If you stuck around, seriously appreciate you. And this is the deployment breakdown for the Starshatter Arsenal list. And I'll go ahead and link some videos up top for you to check out. Again, appreciate you. And until the next one.